job. I have a personal business outside of my 40-hour job, and I was determined to take 2 classes. I've always taken 2 classes every semester. That's the way I've done it, way I can do it. And he had said, I really think, Lynn, you should take 1. And I took 2, and I'm dropping 1. I should have taken 1. So really talk to the people in that program. They are going to be honest with you. They're going to give you a feel. When you tell them what your life is like, they're your advisor. But graduate work is very, very different from undergraduate work. And for me, as a first semester, that was kind of a wake-up call. I guess I just assumed it would be kind of the same, but it's very, very different. A lot, at least in my program, it's a lot of reading. A lot of reading.
Do you think there's a difference between undergraduate majors? Because you did make a transition between more science-based versus SBS. So
right.
There is more work and expectations, but I wonder, did you have the same?
Well, in online programs as well. Lynn and I are both in an online program. I mean, they do have some face-to-face or blended classes, but the adult and higher education program is an online program. You can actually do the whole program online. So I think online courses, there's a little bit more to them. And I think that's one thing most students should realize is it's not easy online classes. You've got to check in every day. There's a lot of students in the class. 20 students. You've got to have a conversation with these people. You've got to read. You've got to write. So I think that's something to take into account if you're having online classes.
So like Lisa said, whatever program you're interested in, ask, is there a graduate of that program? Is there someone in that program that you could talk to? Because they are going to tell you, okay, some semesters are this way, some semesters are that way. You're going to want to find out.
I had the same wake-up call with the MLS program and the difference between undergraduate and graduate. It was the workload, the reading, the amount of reading, the writing, and just really time management. I worked full-time, started a young family at the same time as I was going through my degree. So
Lisa actually planned the birthing of the baby specifically to fit her school schedule, and actually succeeded.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I took the summer off.
Impressive.
Took the summer off from taking classes that he was born. I doubled up the semester before, so I didn't really skip a beat. But there was a lot more reading. Again, that is going to be program specific, because if you're in a science, that's going to be different sort of research and lab. But for MLS, the reading and all that.
I usually tell students it's about double.
I do need to add, and I hesitated because I didn't want to get into a promotional aspect, but it is objectively the case that many SBS students who have gone into different programs related to SBS, I just won't start naming them, have found that it was not as much of a transition as they had feared, because they were used to reading and writing a fair bit.
That's
so
true.
It's important to talk with programs, to feel some confidence in your degree and your preparation for graduate school. Arts and humanities programs, and I think all of LHCs, but that's why I kind of wondered, perhaps sciences you have a lot of time and rigor in different ways, but in terms of reading and writing papers, that may not have been.
It was a shock.
It was a shock. It won't be as much of a shock with an SBS, and of course, again, it all depends. But I've heard that from enough students that they were ready and they did well. So I really want to emphasize that the SBS program has prepared many students to do well in many different ways, many different programs. It's been pretty striking and important to us, because we don't want to send you out and then say, oh my gosh, I can't handle it. If you're doing well in your courses and again feel engaged and aligned as where you want to be, I think you can feel pretty confident. It will be different. You also have to think about it differently. I know it was many years ago, but I had to readjust also because of how I thought about school. In my case, I had not had the same professional background and experience that many of our students already have. But I kept thinking about it being like the best of what I liked about being an undergraduate when I walked into graduate school. That really didn't work very well. It was very intellectually stimulating potentially, but sometimes you might want to think about it like another part of your professional development and job. So stay intellectually attuned, stay excited about areas, but realize that it's no longer just, or it depends what you were doing and what you liked about undergraduate, but it is different. But it wasn't because it was more work, but it was a different mindset. What am I doing and why? What do I want to get out of it? And to become a little more proactive in terms of professional applications. That was a big change. That's one thing that I would share, that you still might find, even if the workload is the same.
Can George speak to what it's like to be a full-time graduate student? Because we've heard two people who are...
Yeah, many will do part-time.
I mean, I can't compare it to the undergraduate process here, obviously, but I'm taking 3 classes right now, and it's manageable, and you just got to kind of figure your schedule out and try and kind of stick to it, really. It's a very different learning process here than the one in England, that's for sure. You have a lot more assistance, there's a lot more guidance, the readings are a lot more specific in terms of where you go to access your information. And so there is a sense that there's a lot more guidance, I think, from the institution here. But in terms of trying to keep up with it myself, I mean, I'm always sort of chasing my tail, but I think it's manageable, for sure. I mean, if I can do it, I think pretty much anyone can do it, so, yeah.
Two of the most common things that I find myself in discussions with are whether it makes sense to take a little time off between graduating and going to graduate school. Not necessarily for the purpose of getting some professional experience, which Jan talked to earlier, which is a really good idea in a lot of fields, but really in terms of your temperament, your tolerances, your exhaustion level, all of those things, then that weighed against losing momentum. So those are issues I would really urge you to think about, because it is a very, especially if you're going to be working, it is a very, very engaging process. It really forces a level of engagement, I think, that really exceeds what you even experience as an undergraduate. And then the other thing that I find myself having conversations with a lot with students, and at least I'd love some thoughts about this, is if they're going into a very formulaic program, where the admissions are very formulaic, I'm thinking nursing and OT, and I'm sure there are others here, if your GPA is quite substantially below that level that they consider to be the kind of cutoff, is it worth applying? If you've got all kinds of other, like you have a reason for a bad year, if you have an extraordinary background outside of school, should you apply?
It's really case dependent, I would say, and I would look at, before I would advise someone, I would look at the transcripts, and I would look at transcript. You can look at your transcript from your major GPA, your transcript if you have 2 bachelor's degrees, or if you have a bachelor's degree from many, many years ago when you were fresh out of high school, versus something else you've taken more credits recently. It all weighs in. And what I can say about the programs, and probably all programs at USM though, they really take your entire application packet into consideration. So it isn't just your GPA. If you fall below what they're asking for, though, it is important to address that with an addendum. But if your essay and your letters of rec are stellar, if your test score it's fabulous. Those are all things that they take into consideration. So again, I would take it on a case-by-case basis, really.
And sometimes programs will admit you conditionally. So the case where I think, was it Lee or Carol, somebody said you can take a couple classes before you start if you might be a weak candidate, and show them you can get an A in a graduate course. There are also conditional admits. For example, in our program, if you can get a conditional admit that requires you to get a B or better in your first 2 graduate courses before you can move on. And if you don't, then you don't stay in the program. But that allows people who have, a different sort of history, access and a chance to succeed.
One of the things you talked about was if you've got any of these bumps in your history, to potentially address them with an addendum. I think all of us as faculty writing letters of reference have also either volunteered or been asked to address that. And that's, again, where a place, if you are coming to somebody to write a letter of reference and you say, gee, that period where I'll give an example because we've had people who've been in this. I want to go into, a particular form of counseling. I wasn't sober. I lost my license. I lost my family. I've been sober for 15 years, but I'm going to use that earlier experience in my counseling. I think I'll make a terrific counselor. They've got to address it perhaps, and we can help. We can say, yes, in the coursework they did with us, they were able to bring that experience. They were able to do good work because they weren't just talking about their experience. They were now understanding it in terms of therapeutic models, whatever. But we can help with that process.
Your experience in applying?
Well, from my experience in applying, it is very important to do a lot of research into what you want to do, and there are a lot of different ways that you can do research. I've probably used and abused Google many nights, looking at different types of different avenues. I would also, another aspect of research is looking at jobs that you want to do after you obtain a master's level education. Is this what I want to do with my degree? Like, is this something that I want to do? Which really kind of helped narrow what application I wanted to submit for which master's program. Originally, I had set out going to law school. I thought that was definitely what I wanted to do. But here I said, and next year I'll be going to the MSW program because I realized that is something that truly spoke to me. So that research is so important. And then also researching, what exactly you want to put into your graduate admission. The essay was something that I really took a lot of time with the MSW program. There is no interview. There was no point, like I could just go in there and shine and say, please take me, I'm awesome for this program. So it really depended upon my writing, and I also wanted to make it personal. Like, this is my information, this is my life that I want to share with you. Please come with me along this journey. Please take me. So, the essay, I approached the application process as almost having another class in my class load. So I had made sure not to overextend my class load for that semester, and I also started to look at the application process the summer before my senior year. Usually, also, if you have to take tests like the GRE or the MAT, I learned that the MSW program didn't require me to do that, but it's also good to have a buffer date. And by kind of what I mean by that is that, say you have to take the GRE, take it 2 dates before it's actually due. So if you don't like your first scores, there are a lot of, there can be nervous test taking. You have to go into a very specific testing facility, and you're not in a classroom that you're used to, and that can sometimes weird people out or freak them out. The first time that I had to do that, I was a little weirded out. So but the rule of thumb is if you have to take it and submit it in the fall, maybe take it in the beginning of the summer so that you can catch that second date at the end of summer too. So that's some of the research that I found in applying to graduate school.
So about the GREs, something that admissions committees will often look at is if you got a slightly weaker GPA but your GREs are strong, they'll say, oh, okay. Or if your GREs are weaker but your GPA is strong and maybe one of your reference letter writers comments that, this seems to be an underestimate of your potential and you've always done really well in Excel, those things balance each other out. We're looking for balance.
You can also sort of create your own interview. So if your program doesn't have an interview, you can always set up a meeting with, somebody who just happens to be chair of the admissions committee, to talk about the program. So then they will have seen your sparkle, and they'll have a face to go along with